Hey yo everyone, J-Funk here once again. Today I'd like to answer the question of should you play Windwalker Monk in patch 11.2? As of recording this video, Shadowpan seems to have become the generic recommendation for all content because of the recent changes and bug fixes. But the two hero talent options are pretty close, so on fights that are shorter than 5 minutes, Conduit gets a little bit ahead. This hero talent balance reminds me of late Narrowbar Palace, where on speed kills, Conduit could perform better, and overall, I think we're in a healthy state for hero talent choice. There's a really nice generic change for spinning Crane Kick, where you can now cast instant spells, such as Interrupt or Tiger Palm during the channel, and its behavior has somewhat reverted back to what it was prior to the War Within, except you also auto-attack during it. As for the tier sets, I think Shadowpan's tier set feels like a very natural extension of what was already present on the tree prior to this patch. So much so that I would like the second part of this 2-piece and 4-piece to stick around in some capacity in the future for Shadowpan, as I really feel like it's the missing puzzle piece that Shadowpan has been looking for. Keeping up against all odds, having every wisdom buff, and just constantly discharging flurry strikes in your cooldowns feels really, really good. Conduit, on the other hand, after the nerfs feels a little weird. I understand and recognize that it needed to be nerfed, but it does feel a little lackluster compared to pre-nerf. So if you play with it on the PTR, you'll notice how much slower it feels. With that said, it's not weak by any means, and the double heart windows when they are active do feel pretty nice. I just think Conduit is bogged down by a few things this patch that may get worked out, such as the trinket balance forcing you to 2-minute Conduit playstyles, which isn't fun. Moving on to Raid, Windwalker has had its ups and downs in the PTR. I would say that one of the only fights in the Raid that felt bad to play as Windwalker was Soul Hunters. 3-target sustained cleave is just not our cup of tea. The rest of them felt fine. In particular, Soulbinder, Forge Weaver, and Nexus King all felt like you could do pretty well. With Soulbinder, it's a lot of pad damage, but there were some pulls where I shot up to the top by a bunch, and the 2-minute timings of Shadowpan aligned pretty naturally in that fight, as well as the constant 3-target burst cleave that happens with the ads that spawn for amp cap value. For Forge Weaver, I was somewhat unsure of the choice between Conduit or Shadowpan during testing, but I think Shadowpan may have the slight edge now after the buffs because of the damage amp that happens after the intermission. Then there's targets stacked on top of it that kind of hurts Conduit's damage, but for Shadowpan, being able to use your lighting on those 3 targets is really strong. And finally, on Nexus King, there's a variety of damage profiles in this fight, but you are pretty flexible for what you can be good at, and there was never really a point in that fight where I felt like my damage was going to suck. It also seems like on Dementius, having a displacement effect like Transcendence is going to be very useful in the last phase, so I could see us getting play there as well. But overall in the raid, I would say that Windwalker is probably the least good of the monk buff providers in raid, but it's still pretty good. It's not bad by any means, and it has been much worse in the past. On to Mythic Plus, Windwalker is in a similar-ish situation that it was in last season, where your raid buff is pretty useful if a physical damage-oriented comp becomes popular, but your overall damage contribution is a little bit weaker than I would personally like, and your large target AoE is still pretty bad. You'll notice this a lot in Halls of Atonement, Gambit, and Floodgate. As for the hero talents in Mythic Plus, I think it's somewhat of a toss-up. Shadowpan has higher potential to be better, and on average feels better, but has heavy RNG swings where if you didn't set up your wisdom deck prior to a dungeon, and then you do a big first pull, and then you don't get shadow in your first 2 wisdom buffs and your cooldowns, you're probably going to do tank damage on that pull, and then it'll feel really bad. But the extra Storm and Fire usages feel pretty nice compared to Conduit, and there's never a pull where you are lacking the resources to do damage. You pretty much always have a Storm and Fire charge for every pull. You just really need the RNG to swing in your favor as Shadowpan. However, for Conduit, I really like the on-demand damage that Conduit can provide in dungeons still, and you could do a respectable amount of damage in bigger pulls somewhat, and it just feels really powerful in those situations when you have like 125% haste or so, with instant cast Fist of Furies and double heart windows. It can feel really strong, and your low target cleave on fights like Big Mama and things like that are really good still with Conduit. So I could see that being actually like a play in keys as well. You can kind of play either. Overall, I'd say that Windwalker is in a pretty decent spot this patch. You aren't the most powerful spec by any means, like you were in Raid last year, and your Mythic Plus performance is about the same as it was, but the playstyles provided by the tier sets are interesting and fun. So I'd say if you are currently a Windwalker main or plan on playing it as an alt, you won't be too disappointed with this patch. I don't think a whole lot of reason to doom and gloom this tier as Windwalker is historically much much worse in final patches than what it is shaping up to be. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.